I'm just taking you to CRERAD quickly, and basically when I click on this, I'm going to click on graphs of measured activities, click on that, and that's what I get. And I should get a nice PDF with lots of lines and graphs and coloured lines. Now, EURDEP has been censored, and I don't quite know what's going on with CRERAD, but it does look like CRERAD has been possibly hacked or something. But quite unusual that none of the PDFs show the data. They've only got the outline, and all the information inside has been kind of deleted. Okay, I'm just taking you to the European Commission Joint Research Centre Institute for Transuranium Elements. Basically on the 6th of April there were some switch-offs all over EURDEP, and if you go on EURDEP now, you will see that the data stops on the 6th of April. We're going to do that just very quickly. I'm going to click accept. I just want to bring it to your attention that it stops on the 6th, and if I click here, being a bit slow. Well, anyway, it's ending on the 1850, the 6th of the 4th, 2012, and there seems to be a problem with it loading as well. But anyway, so let's get rid of that. The next thing to look at, I think, is the fact that the actual EURDEP is running still, and we know that because we can go transmitted data, and if that works, yeah, it does. So we've got transmitted data. It's ending on the 16th. Country statistics. If I bring you to country statistics, you can see that the latest data, just at the top one, basically is the 16th, 4th, 2012, 9 o'clock this morning. It's a couple of hours ago, maybe an hour ago, actually, because we're UK time here. And I'll just point out that when NILU, NILU of Norway went down, the cloud projection, the actual contamination projection systems they have there, they were online, like EURDEP was, and they got taken off. And the reason they got taken off was because they said that the emissions were basically less than they were projecting, than the figures they were originally given. Of course, later the figures turned out more, and but the reason they stopped was because they didn't want to cause any fear, and people were misinterpreting the data, putting extra amounts in. As it turns out, the amounts were larger. They were worked out larger by scientific people, and they had to be worked out larger by scientific people because the Japanese had destroyed the first 5 days' evidence. Although I'm sure the Americans have so many US bases there with radiological equipment, I'm sure that that they would have some data that would help. But all this stuff's been kept very quiet. And it's as you can see by the EURDEP, the way that's going. We've had some radiological issues in Turkey after an earthquake, big switch off. But anyway, coming back to NILU, are they doing that for the same reason as EURDEP then? To stop the fear, because there's emissions, but in their eyes they're not so bad, but they don't want other people to know that these emissions are a little bit too high. So and we know that actually in certain places around Europe those emissions are incredibly high. So anyway, NILU was off last year. It went off quite quickly. It was one of the last ones to be taken off, by the way, the Norwegian monitors, because taxpayers pay for it. But they did anyway, and they've privatised it, so that's a job done. And now really EURDEP has now been kind of privatised. You can't access the data. It's not a public mapping system anymore. It has a map, but it doesn't do anything. Right, so basically, why are they doing it? Well, it's mitigating emissions. That's one reason, so that their statistics are much more improved. And at the end of the year, they give these little figures that we've just seen on that sheet, and we know there's switch offs, and we know that they're averaged out a lot, so there's a reduced amount, and we know certain countries are worse for it than others. And basically, also, I think the other reason would be a good nuke PR. Basically, they don't want the people knowing things. So basically, if they take information away, people can't be upset about it. So they take the information away. And by the way, EURDEP is one of the last major monitoring systems. The American one went down, the Japanese one's gone down. They've now replaced the Japanese one with Safecast, because a citizen monitors group, because the Japanese government and monitoring system is very corrupt. And I thought EURDEP, and I think a lot of the monitor people that work for EURDEP are very much like the CRERAD crowd. They're doing a job, and if they, how they look at things, they can say, yes, you can have such a dose. So I might disagree on the amount of that dosage in a small way, but the fact is that they are concerned. When there's a big release in Hungary, and Budapest gets contaminated, that's a concern for all monitors. Their job is to keep on top of this type of thing. And really, I don't quite know what their job is now. Their job now really is working for a PR company and mitigating emissions for future, should we say, suits against energy companies, shareholders. So, that seems to be what that's about. And we'll go to news actually very quickly, because this is EURDEP news. And basically, it will tell us what's going on. 10 days with nothing. It says from no data from the Italian network until Monday the 2nd of April. This weekend until, so it was switched off for a weekend, the Italian one. It switches off more than that, but they just happened to mention this one. Okay, so the news isn't telling us much. Basically, it's saying nothing about what's going on. And basically, there's a lot of suspicious activity going on. So, of course, what can we do about this? What can we do? In fact, nothing. Like NILU, they just withdraw it, and that's the end of it. And NILU, actually, because it's taxpayers, it was up to the Norwegian people to say, "Oi, you can't do that," but they didn't, and so therefore we lost NILU. Now, EURDEP, I think, is funded by individual countries. There's some money from the European Commission. It's an amalgam of funds, I think, that fund this. Basically, my surprise was when NILU did get dropped, actually, and this is connected to EURDEP, I think, because when the Hungary incident went off, IAEA are covering it up on EURDEP, and Norway are trying to blame Japan and Russia initially, and then basically, at the start of this year, the IAEA had to admit, it was Hungary. CRERAD put out a report saying how contaminated Budapest is with a very nasty isotope, and from a medical reactor. And so basically, they've been covering it up, and NILU have been part of this as well. And especially with Budapest, where lots of Romania and various local monitoring stations were being switched off or manipulated or whatever. Right, concerning Staten and Stavelen, the Norwegian monitoring crowd, I'd just like to bring you down to the fact that they put out a report there. The director of NILU put out a report, He did one on Japan, saying how cool it was, and there wasn't much contamination over there. It was hardly worth noticing, and that was completely untrue. And we found it since the information started to come out that was a very incorrect statement on his, on what he thinks was coming out of Daiichi, and the Japanese covering it up. They've made no comment on their report based on whatever data they had, and the fact that the Japanese were destroying the evidence and wouldn't give it to them and stuff. But they still come out with that great report anyway, which everybody believed. And as I was saying with Budapest and EURDEP and the cover-up, just sort of bring it down to their international cooperation, and they've become more of a business now. So Regional Excellence Programme Safety of Nuclear Energy, Norwegian programme with Bulgaria. So they were doing some stuff with Bulgaria. We can go over to this one. There's also another one with the Norwegian Cooperation Programme for Romania. So so basically they agreed to fund an IAEA extra budget. So they're the Norwegian crowd with their big money are funding the IAEA budgetary program on safe nuclear energy in Romania. I'll put the link here, and you can click that read more bit if you so wish to. And then it's just got an impact assessment of elevated levels of natural tectonic radioactivity on wildlife on the north, and a joint project by the Norwegian people, and the International Economy, Modern Knowledge of Russia, Institute of Biology Russia, and they're doing a thing on natural technogenic radioactivity on wildlife in the north. So but certainly they work with Romania, they work with Bulgaria, it's next to Hungary. So I just wanted to bring you to that. It's the Russians who are supplying reactors to Turkey. Anyway, it all connects, you know that. So, but I wanted to bring you to the Norwegian one, where they mentioned Romania and Bulgaria. They were working in cooperation down there with them, and they're not able to spot the burping of Hungary. That, to me, is suspicious. All right, that's all I'm saying. It's very suspicious. They were right next door to Hungary. I could spot it in America, in the UK. In the north of Norway, they were getting measurements of it, or certainly in the mid of Norway and the south of Norway, they were getting measurements of it. They have iodine 131 and other monitor type. So at the end of the day, this is it. I'm just going to leave this one with you as well. Conspiracy time. Okay, now to finish up here, I'll just mention a couple of little points. One thing is that as I've been looking at EURDEP and publishing on any news and eventually on YouTube, my main idea was to document this, because looking at all the other monitor systems, and especially the American one, I realised that the IAEA had let their pulse off the ball. It's such a huge system. There's 4,000 monitors, and you can't keep a track of it all the time. I couldn't, but the IAEA couldn't either, and they don't tend to. They've got a different access to this system, and I think possibly they've been a bit surprised about how much you can glean from even this averaged out system, and the way it's used traditionally. And it's not been, seems to be not being picked up by anybody. If I just walked into it this year or last year and gone, oh look, there's loads of contamination, is that just me, or has it been like this for years? And we know that the reactors are getting older, so there's lots more problems, a lot more corrosion, radiation, salt water, salt air, all these things. They just take the knock out of all the concrete, metal, the whole lot. So basically, the way I look at it, I'm just sort of thinking that, that they have responded to things that I was doing, to the point now where you can see on the map there's no green, there's no orange, really obvious ways of seeing things. It's tiny little blue dots that you can't quite see, green, and then kind of yellow that's not too different from the green. Yeah, that was done because after them manipulating the mapping system so you couldn't download the data, and then starting to film it to sort of overcome that issue, and then now they change the map back to an older format to make it harder to see. Obviously, I've got high definition camera, so it kind of didn't work out too bad. But if it had been a standard camera, maybe that's what they used as when they tried